Imagine you sit down at a table for dinner and the seat across from you is empty. No one is there. Just a chair, a plate, a cup, a space. And yet somehow that empty space is the most powerful guest in the room. That's kind of what it's like when we talk about dark energy. Today I want to invite you to have a meal with something you can't see, can't touch, can't taste, and yet is quietly shaping everything. The way galaxies move, the way time stretches, and even the way we think about our own place in the universe. So, pull up a chair with me. Let's dine with dark energy. I remember the first time I heard those two words together, dark energy. I was expecting something from a science fiction movie, glowing blue stuff in a crystal or some smoky black cloud swirling around a villain. Instead, what I found was something stranger and quieter, a kind of emptiness that isn't really empty. A nothing that behaves like a something, and that something is pushing the universe apart. Now, before you think, okay, this is going to get too complicated, stay with me. We're not going to dive into heavy equations or weird symbols. Think of this more like a story told across a dinner table. A story where the main character is invisible, but its fingerprints are everywhere. Let's start simple. Look around the space you're in right now. Maybe you're in your kitchen, maybe on a bus, maybe walking in a park. Wherever you are, just notice the empty space around you, between you and the wall, between you and the ceiling, between your hand and your phone. It looks like nothing, right? Just air, just space. Now imagine that same kind of space, but stretched out between the stars, between galaxies. Out there, the space isn't filled with air like in your room. It's colder, quieter, darker. If you could stand in that space between galaxies, you wouldn't hear anything. No traffic, no voices, just silence, deep and huge. But according to what we've learned, that giant silence isn't truly empty. It's filled with something we call dark energy. We call it dark not because it's evil or scary, but because we don't really see it directly. It doesn't shine, it doesn't glow, it doesn't bounce light back to us. It's more like a hidden pressure inside the fabric of space itself. And here's the wild part. This dark energy is making the universe grow faster and faster, like dough rising in an oven that's slowly being turned up. To make sense of that, picture a loaf of bread baking. Before you put it in the oven, it's small and compact. Inside, there are tiny bubbles of air. As it bakes, the dough expands. Those little bubbles move away from each other, not because the bubbles themselves are walking apart, but because the dough between them is stretching. Galaxies in our universe are like those bubbles. They sit inside the dough of space. For a long time, people thought those galaxies were flying apart because of the Big Bang, like shrapnel from an explosion. But then something surprising was discovered. The space between them isn't just coasting outward, it's speeding up. It's as if the oven keeps getting hotter, making the dough expand faster and faster. Dark energy is the name we give to whatever is turning up that cosmic oven. We don't yet know exactly what it is, but we know this. It behaves like a gentle push built into space itself. Now, when I say push, don't imagine a loud shove. It's not like being hit by a wave or knocked over by wind. It's more like the slow, steady pressure of a plant sprouting through concrete. Quiet, patient, relentless. When I first tried to picture this, my mind did something funny. It tried to imagine dark energy as some kind of mist floating between stars. But that's not quite right. It's more accurate to imagine the nothing itself stretching, the tablecloth of reality slowly pulling itself apart. Try this. Imagine you've got a rubber sheet on a table. You draw little dots on it with a marker. Those dots are galaxies. Now gently pull on the edges of the sheet. The dots don't move on their own, but they get farther apart because the sheet between them is stretching. That stretching, that's dark energy at work. Now, what does any of this have to do with dining? With food? With you and me eating and living our everyday lives? More than it first seems. When you sit down to eat, it's easy to focus only on what's on your plate. The color of the vegetables, the smell of something grilled, the warmth of soup rising in gentle steam. But food doesn't arrive out of nowhere. It comes from a chain of events. Seeds, sun, rain, time, people working, machines moving, recipes passed down. The universe is like that too. Everything we touch, taste, smell, and feel is the result of a long cosmic recipe. Ingredients mixed over billions of years. And dark energy is like this quiet, invisible ingredient that doesn't show up on the surface of the dish, but completely changes how the dish comes together. Without it, the universe would have grown differently. Galaxies might have formed in other ways. Stars could have gathered in tighter clumps or spread more thinly. The timing of everything would be off. Maybe planets like Earth wouldn't have formed when they did. Maybe life wouldn't have had the calm, steady background it needed to slowly unfold. You and I are eating in a universe flavored by dark energy. That thought hits me sometimes when I'm in the middle of a simple meal. I'll be chewing on a piece of bread, feeling the soft texture in my mouth, tasting a little salt, maybe some olive oil, and I'll remember, this bread is made of atoms forged in stars, scattered by exploding suns, pulled together by gravity, and all of it floating in a universe whose expansion is driven by something we call dark energy. The crunch of the crust is a tiny sound happening in a much bigger silence. When scientists first realized the universe's expansion was speeding up, not slowing down, it was like sitting at a restaurant and suddenly noticing that the walls were slowly moving away from you. Not just the people, not just the tables, but the walls themselves, the floor, the ceiling, all stretching. At first, it doesn't feel real. You think, no, that can't be right. Maybe I'm imagining it. Maybe the chair just slid. But then you measure, you check again, you ask someone else to look. They see it too. That's basically what happened in the 1990s. Two teams of astronomers looking at distant exploding stars, these special kinds called supernova, noticed that those faraway lights were dimmer than expected. Dimmer meant farther. Farther than they should have been if the universe's expansion were slowing down or just coasting. The only way to make sense of it was something was speeding the expansion up. That something became what we now call dark energy. There's a part of me that finds comfort in the fact that some of the biggest discoveries in science start with, that's weird. It's like when you're cooking and you taste the sauce and there's some flavor you can't quite place. You know it's there. You can't see it, but you can't ignore it either. It changes everything. Dark energy is that strange flavor in the sauce of the universe. We don't see it directly. We see what it does. And what it does is wild. It makes the universe bigger at an ever faster pace. Now let's bring this closer to your body, your senses. Imagine you're sitting outside at night, maybe at a small table, maybe with a warm drink in your hands. The cup is warm against your fingers. You can smell something gentle rising with the steam. Maybe chocolate, maybe tea, maybe just the clean smell of hot water in a ceramic cup. The air around you is cool. You feel the difference between the warmth of the cup and the coolness of the night. Above you, a few stars peek through the darkness. Those stars are like little holes in a huge curtain, letting light through from far away. Some of that light has been traveling for millions, even billions of years. While that light was crossing space, the space itself was stretching. The road it was traveling on was growing longer under its feet, so to speak. Dark energy is in that story. It's the thing that made the road stretch faster and faster as time went on. There's something a bit poetic about that. You, sitting there sipping your drink, are catching ancient light that had to fight its way through a universe that was quietly changing as it traveled. A universe whose emptiness is doing something active. We're used to thinking of nothing as just nothing. An empty glass is just waiting to be filled. A blank plate is just a plate with no food. But in physics, in the way we see the universe, nothing can have properties. It can bend, it can vibrate, it can expand. Dark energy is like the personality of empty space. I think about that sometimes when I put my fork down between bites and just pause. I notice the space between the fork and the plate, the tiny gap of air, the quiet there. And I remember, if you zoomed out far enough, if you could go from my table to my city to my planet, my galaxy, and then beyond, most of the universe is like that gap. Not full of stuff, full of space. And that space is not just a background. It has its own behavior. When we say dark energy might be about 70% of the universe, we don't mean 70% of what you can hold. Not 70% of rocks or water or stars. We mean 70% of the energy budget, the total way the universe stores and moves energy. Most of that is in this invisible stretching of space. That means that most of what makes the universe what it is, we don't really understand yet. It's like we're reading a long, beautiful novel, and we suddenly realize that most of the ink on the page is in a language we haven't learned to read. I find that both humbling and strangely hopeful. Humbling because it reminds me, I am small. My life, my worries, my plans, my lists of things to do, they sit inside a universe that is bigger and stranger than I can fully grasp. Hopeful because it means we're not done learning. There are still secrets out there, waiting. The story isn't finished. When I think about dark energy, I also think about the quiet forces in a human life. The things we can't see, but that slowly shape us. The way a kind word from years ago still gives us courage today. The way a small, painful memory can live in our chest like a knot, changing the way we move through the world. The way habits over time pull us in certain directions. Just like dark energy, these forces are not loud. They're not always obvious, but they push, they stretch, they expand or contract the space inside us. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and there's tension you can't quite see? No one's yelling, no one's fighting, but the air feels heavy, like it's thicker. You might say the energy in here is strange. It's not a scientific phrase, but it points at something real, that invisible, emotional atmosphere that affects how we act, how we speak, how we feel. Or think of the opposite, a room full of laughter where you feel lighter just by being there. Your shoulders drop, you breathe easier. You might not remember exactly what was said, but you remember the feeling. Those are like our personal human versions of dark energy. They're the unseen forces that move us. When we sit down to eat with someone, we're not just sharing food. We're sharing those invisible pressures and pulls too. The weight of their day, the glow of their joy, the quiet of their sadness. The space between two people at a table isn't really empty. It's full of things that can't be easily named. I remember once sitting at a dinner with an older relative I didn't know very well. The food was good, warm, homemade, the kind that fills the room with smells that wrap around you like a blanket, garlic, onion, something baking, something frying. But the space between us felt stretched. We didn't quite know how to talk to each other. Words came slowly. Forks clicked softly on plates. Glasses touched the table with gentle thuds. Time felt like it was moving at a different speed. Then, almost by accident, we found a small memory in common, a place we had both visited, a taste we both remembered from childhood. As we talked, I felt that invisible space between us change. It was like something relaxed. The conversation, which had been drifting apart like galaxies, suddenly found a gentle pull holding it together. I think about that a lot when I think about dark energy and gravity. Gravity pulls things together. It's what makes you stay on your chair instead of floating into the ceiling. It's what holds planets around stars and stars in galaxies. Dark energy, on the other hand, is doing the opposite on the largest scales. It's pushing galaxies apart. In our lives, we have both too. We have gravity in the form of love, friendship, memory, community, things that pull us closer. And we also have our own kind of dark energy, things that push us away from each other. Fear, misunderstanding, the slow drift of people who stop talking, stop sharing, stop meeting at the same table. At the cosmic level, gravity and dark energy are in a kind of quiet competition. For a long time after the Big Bang, gravity was winning. Matter, pulled together, formed stars, galaxies, clusters. But as the universe got bigger and the matter spread out, the pull of gravity grew weaker over huge distances. Meanwhile, dark energy, this built-in push of space itself, stayed steady. Eventually, it began to dominate. That's when the expansion started to speed up. On a human level, sometimes it feels like the forces that push us apart are winning. People get busier, cities grow, online worlds pull our attention into separate bubbles, the shared spaces shrink, the common tables get fewer. But unlike the universe, we're not just passengers. We can choose to create gravity. We can choose to pull together again, a phone call, a text, a meal, a walk, a small "how are you?" that actually waits for an honest answer. Cosmic dark energy doesn't ask our permission. It just does what it does. But the dark energy in our social lives, the quiet forces that make us drift apart, we can notice those. We can gently push back. Sometimes when I'm cooking, I think about how much of it is about creating a little pocket of gravity, pulling people into the same space around the same dish, the smell of onions softening in a pan, the sound of something sizzling, the warmth of the oven. They're signals that say, come here, gather, sit down, be together for a while. And all around that small, bright circle of connection, the universe is still stretching, galaxies are still drifting, dark energy is still doing its thing. There's something beautiful about that contrast. The vast, cold expansion outside and the small, warm table inside. If you could step outside the universe and look at it from the outside, not that we really can, but just imagine, you'd see a huge, dark, almost empty space sprinkled with islands of light, galaxies like our Milky Way, swirling with stars. And slowly, over billions of years, those islands move farther and farther apart. The distances between them grow. The darkness between them deepens. Dark energy is like a quiet hand on the volume knob of space, slowly turning it up. More distance, more emptiness, more separation. Yet inside one of those galaxies, around one average star, on one small planet, a person lifts a spoon to their mouth. They taste soup. They feel warmth slide down their throat. They remember something, a childhood kitchen, a smell, a voice. They feel not alone. The universe is expanding, but inside that person's mind, a memory pulls inward, closer, tighter. Sometimes when I think about dark energy, I get a strange double feeling. On one hand, I feel really, really small. Just a tiny creature on a tiny world in a universe that's mostly empty and getting emptier. On the other hand, I feel connected. Because the atoms in my body, the thoughts in my mind, the food on my plate, the light in my eyes, all of that is happening inside this huge, expanding stage. I'm part of the story, even if I'm only a handful of words on one page. There's a question people sometimes ask. What will happen in the far future if dark energy keeps pushing the universe apart? If things go on as we think they are now, galaxies will get farther apart. At some point, a very, very, very long time from now, distant galaxies will be so far away that their light can't reach us anymore. Our local group of galaxies might stay together, held by gravity, but everything else will drift beyond our horizon. Imagine sitting at a table, and over an unimaginable amount of time, every other table in the restaurant slowly slides away, out of sight, out of hearing, out of reach. Eventually, it's just your table and a pool of light around it, floating in darkness. That future sounds lonely, but remember, it's not our near future. It's a picture painted on the scale of trillions of years, beyond anything we can emotionally feel. On human timescales, on the scale of our lives, our families, our cultures, the universe is stable enough. The stars we see will be there tomorrow. The moon will still rise and set. We have time to live, to learn, to love, to cook, to eat, to talk. Dark energy might shape the far future of everything, but it doesn't control what we do with our next meal, our next conversation, our next choice. I like to think of it this way. The universe gives us the big stage: space, time, laws of nature, dark energy, expanding the whole thing, and then says, okay, here you go. Inside this huge drama, what little story will you tell? Sometimes that story is as simple as a quiet dinner alone, where you finally listen to your own thoughts. You sit, fork in hand, feel the weight of it. You notice the way the light from the window falls on your plate. You hear the soft hum of a fridge, the distant sound of a car passing outside, the clink of your fork as you set it down. In that moment, you're not thinking about galaxies. You're just there. But even then, you're sitting on a planet that's spinning, orbiting a star, which is orbiting the center of a galaxy, which is drifting in a universe whose expansion is being accelerated by dark energy. You are both tiny and exactly where you belong. I sometimes imagine dark energy as the world's most patient dinner guest. It never speaks. It never lifts its fork. It doesn't join the conversation. But if it left the room, everything about the room would slowly change. Distances, shapes, the whole structure of the meal. It's there in the background, letting the story unfold the way it does. And maybe in a softer, more personal sense, each of us also has that kind of quiet presence inside. A part of us that doesn't talk much, that doesn't shout or demand, but that gently pushes us in certain directions, toward growth, toward change, toward some version of ourselves we haven't fully met yet. We often notice the loud parts of our minds, the stress, the to-do lists, the worries, the arguments. But under all that, there might be a kind of inner dark energy, a slow expansion of who we are. New experiences gently stretching our understanding. New ideas slowly widening the space of what we think is possible. New people entering our lives and quietly changing our sense of self. You might not feel it in the moment. Day to day, it can seem like nothing is changing. But then you look back over years and you realize, I'm not who I used to be. My inner universe has expanded. We grow the way the universe grows, slowly, quietly, with long stretches where it feels like nothing is happening, until suddenly we notice everything is different. So when we dine with dark energy, we're not just talking about some distant, cold thing in outer space. We're also talking about how we live with the unknown, how we sit at the table with mysteries we can't see, can't taste, can't prove in everyday life, but that we know are there. There are questions we don't have answers for yet. What exactly is dark energy at the deepest level? Is it something built into space itself? Or is it some kind of new field, something we haven't discovered? Will it always behave the same way, or could it change? Scientists are working on these questions. They build telescopes, launch satellites, measure tiny details in how galaxies are spread out, how light bends, how the early universe looked. Each new piece of data is like a crumb on the table, a clue left behind by this silent guest. We might not get the full answer in our lifetime, but that's okay. We're part of a longer conversation. And in the meantime, dark energy keeps doing what it does while we keep doing what we do. Waking up, eating breakfast, going to work, loving people, making mistakes, trying again. To me, there's a kind of peace in that. The universe doesn't wait for us to understand it before it moves. It just moves, and we don't have to understand everything before we live. We just live. Sometimes, at the end of a long day, I'll make something simple to eat, maybe just some rice, some vegetables, a bit of sauce. The smell of garlic hits the hot pan and blooms into the air. I hear the gentle sizzle. I stir with a wooden spoon that has a smooth handle, worn by years of use. I taste the food as I go, adding a bit of salt, a squeeze of lemon. It's ordinary, completely ordinary. But if I pause for just a second, I can feel the extraordinary hiding inside it. The atoms in the garlic, in the rice, in my own hands, all born in stars. The heat in the pan, a tiny echo of the Big Bang's energy, transformed and passed along. The space in my kitchen, just a small patch of the same space that fills the entire universe, stretching quietly under the influence of dark energy. I don't think about all of that every time I cook. That would be exhausting. But knowing it is there, in the background, changes how I feel about being alive. It makes everyday moments feel like small, bright notes in a much larger song. We live in a universe where emptiness is not empty, where silence is full of meaning, where the space between things matters just as much as the things themselves. The space between galaxies, the space between people at a table, the space between your inhale and your exhale. Dark energy teaches us that what looks like nothing can be powerful. Maybe that's a quiet invitation for us too, to not rush past the empty moments in our lives, the pauses, the gaps, the times when nothing seems to be happening. Maybe those spaces are doing more than we think. Maybe they are where we change, where we heal, where we expand. So as we end this little shared meal of ideas, I want you to picture that empty chair at the table again, the one across from you. It's still there, still silent, still unseen. But now maybe it feels a little less empty, because in that chair sits every mystery we haven't solved yet, every question we still carry, every unseen force from dark energy in the distant universe to the quiet hopes and fears inside your own heart. You don't have to fill that chair. You don't have to solve it, fix it, name it completely. You can just let it sit there, a reminder that life is bigger than what we can see, and that it's okay not to know everything. You can lift your fork, take a bite, feel the taste spread across your tongue, swallow, breathe, and live your one small, beautiful life inside this vast, expanding universe. Somewhere far beyond the walls of your room, galaxies are slowly drifting apart, carried on the tide of dark energy. And here you are, for this brief moment, gathered in one small point in space and time, with a body, a mind, a heart, and if you're lucky, a meal in front of you. If dark energy is teaching the universe to expand, maybe our work is a little simpler, a little closer. To expand our kindness, our curiosity, our sense of connection, one conversation, one meal, one breath at a time. The universe will keep stretching, the galaxies will keep moving, dark energy will keep doing its silent work, and we here can keep doing ours, eating, wondering, loving, becoming, dining in our own way with dark energy.